Harald Hardrada is recognized as one of the greatest leaders of the Viking Age. His life story is rich with victories on the battlefield and the desire to establish a kingdom. However, few know how he first presented himself as a warrior and how he transformed into such a great leader. This is not just the story of a warrior, but of a strategist, a leader, and a person who became a legend. Harald's youth was filled with extraordinary events from the Scandinavian world. From a young age, he was already participating in battles and had set great goals to become one of the most heroic warriors of the Viking world. This was not just an adventure, but a struggle for a leader to find his own strength. At the time, great battles and victories granted tremendous power to individuals. In 1040, at the age of 15, Harald joined a great expedition under the leadership of Russian Emperor Yaroslav. This was the greatest test for a young Viking warrior. At the time, there were widespread conflicts between Scandinavia and the Eastern peoples, and this expedition was part of those conflicts. The battles along the Russian borders played a crucial role in shaping Harald as a warrior. Harald's greatest advantage in this battle was not just his military skills, but the development of his strategic thinking. The expedition against the Byzantine Empire provided him with a great opportunity to test himself both on the battlefield and in strategic thinking. While fighting the Byzantines, Harald improved his tactics and also learned to act independently and freely as a warrior. The wars developed not only his physical strength, but also his leadership abilities. His victory over the Byzantine army made him a widely recognized leader among the Vikings. These battles laid the foundation for Harald's future successes. However, behind these battles was another great goal: to gain more power in the Viking world and establish his own state. The victories on the battlefield further promoted Harald's name, and he began to form his own army. He understood that not only victories, but also expanding his territories were crucial. In the Viking world, power was not just about victories, but also about spreading influence. With his warriors, he began to fight for new lands, and through the victories he won in these battles, his name became well known throughout Europe. However, Harald's ambitions did not stop at battles. He also aimed to establish a strong kingdom in Scandinavia and neighboring countries. For this, he participated in many battles and never retreated. The next great battle in Harald's life would make him even stronger. So, why did Harald Hardrada work so hard? His goal was not just to win battles, but also to develop himself through the experiences gained in combat and transform into a legendary leader. These battles helped him understand his talents, weaknesses, and strengths. The victories he achieved in battles made him well known throughout the Scandinavian world, and his name began to be heard in far-flung lands. But this was only the beginning, because Hardrada sought a goal that went far beyond being just a warrior. Every step, every victory, brought him closer to becoming a stronger, more formidable leader. But what happened? Like many warriors, he stepped into an uncertain future. In the later stages of his life, no one could be sure that he would face his greatest battle. Harald Hardrada had already established himself not just as a warrior, but as a strategist and leader. The battle against the Byzantine Empire would define how he would emerge as a strategist and leader in future conflicts. The Byzantine Empire was a powerful force, and Harald's battles aimed to not only make him one of the most powerful leaders in Scandinavia, but also one of the strongest armies in Europe. This period in Harald's life was not just about battles on the battlefield, but also about testing himself in diplomatic struggles. The battle against the Byzantine Empire was more than just a fight. It was a battle for both political and economic power. Harald's goal was not only to win the battle, but to also end the Byzantine Empire's political and economic influence. Byzantine Emperor Constantine IX Monaskos was one of the strongest rulers of the time. His borders had expanded, his economy strengthened, and his army was vast. Harald wanted to weaken this great empire and solidify his position in Scandinavia. He hoped to defeat the Byzantine army and become a recognized figure throughout Europe. The battle against Byzantium proved to be a great test for Hardrada. The experience gained in this battle not only established him as a warrior, but also as a military strategist. Harald's unique tactical approaches and leadership skills earned him a powerful reputation. However, at the end of the battle, it would not be enough to simply speak the name of a leader. Harald needed to measure the outcomes of battles not just by victories, but also through diplomatic maneuvers. So, what lay behind the conflict with the Byzantine Empire? Harald's main objective in these battles was not just to inscribe his name in history, but also to showcase his power to other states. This was not only about battles in Scandinavia and Europe, but also his desire to strengthen his position in both economic and political spheres. Harald's goals in this regard made him not just a warrior, but also a strategic genius. Having defeated the Byzantine Empire, Harald began to succeed not only on the battlefield, but also in the political arena. The victory in this battle marked the greatest step toward becoming one of the most powerful leaders in Scandinavia. However, Harald Hardrada never defined his boundaries by just one battle. He always aspired to even greater goals. He was preparing for the next great battle. Harald's struggle was far from over with Byzantium. He was using the experience gained from this battle to prepare for even bigger conflicts ahead. All of this served his goal of becoming stronger in life and establishing a greater empire. However, these goals would not be easy to achieve. Harald faced even bigger and more difficult challenges. Hardrada was working on new strategies to strengthen and enhance his army, while also trying to bring his allies closer. He aimed to unite the kingdoms of Scandinavia and prepare for future large-scale battles. His next goal was no longer just the Byzantine Empire. Harald's ambition was to dominate all of Europe. But this would not be possible through great battles alone. It would also require navigating diplomatic and military challenges. What more would you like to know about Harald Hardrada? His victories on the battlefield and his political struggles would leave an unforgettable mark on history. But these marks were not limited to just victories. He would also be remembered as a great strategist and leader, becoming a legendary figure in Scandinavia after numerous battles and struggles. Harald Hardrada had already transformed from a warrior and leader into a strategist, fighting against some of Europe's most powerful empires. His victories over the Byzantine Empire had introduced him not just to Scandinavia, but to all of Europe. However, this would not be his final battle. A new, great challenge awaited him: England. Harald's plan to conquer England was one of the largest operations he had ever prepared for. At the time, England was not only one of Europe's most powerful, but also one of its wealthiest countries. Harald's primary goal was to seize the English throne, strengthen Scandinavia, and build a great empire. This was not just a military struggle, it also required major political and economic maneuvering. Harald began identifying the weaknesses of the English kingdom. In 1066, Harald's decision to attack England marked a turning point in his life. He spent several years preparing for the invasion and ultimately launched a massive assault on the country. This attack would not only be a great battle, but also the beginning of a new era. Harald Hardrada had decided to bring not only Scandinavia, but England under his control as well. When Harald Hardrada attacked England, the relations between England and Scandinavia were already extremely tense. In early 1066, England was embroiled in a succession crisis. Following the death of Edward the Confessor, several contenders laid claim to the English throne. Harald Hardrada began strengthening his ties with one of these contenders, Harald Godwinson. Despite this, the biggest obstacle to Harald's ambition of conquering England was the presence of Harald Godwinson and his powerful army. Most of England was preparing for what would become one of the largest wars of the time. However, Harald Hardrada, with his army, was determined to overcome these obstacles and began a major assault on England, exploiting the country's weaknesses. As Harold's army attacked England, it was composed of massive longships and strong warriors. Harold began to strike at England's weak points, showcasing the culture and fighting prowess of Scandinavia. But this attack would not be as easy as he had hoped. After Harald Hardrada's attack on England, what happened next further solidified his reputation, not only as a warrior, but as a great strategist. His plan to conquer England turned into a fierce struggle, but the course of the war would develop in an unexpected way. Yet the outcome of this battle would reveal not only Harold's strength as a warrior, but also his leadership qualities. Which battle was it? Harold's warriors were resilient and well prepared, but the obstacles they faced were immense. The Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066 became one of the most pivotal and decisive moments in their history. This battle would be a turning point for both England and Scandinavia. Harald Hardrada's struggle to seize the English throne would be critically determined by the outcome of this battle. The tremendous effort to conquer England also showcased Harold's leadership and battle strategies. But no single battle could completely change the life of a leader. Harold's life would still face many greater challenges. What happened at the end of this battle? The struggle in England would lead to significant results, both on the battlefield and in the political sphere, and would set Harald Hardrada on his next step of his historic journey. The year 1066 marks one of the greatest turning points in history. Harald Hardrada had transformed from a warrior to a leader, seeking to conquer not only Scandinavia, but also the throne of England. His attack on England became one of the greatest and most magnificent Viking expeditions. However, few knew that the Battle of Stamford Bridge would become the turning point of this great struggle and would completely change Harold's destiny. Harold's goal in this battle was not merely to capture the English throne. He also sought a great victory for the Vikings. His aim was to expand his power in both Scandinavia and England. However, the situation on the battlefield between England and Scandinavia was far from simple. The pressure from all sides demanded that a leader make the toughest decisions. The Battle of Stamford Bridge, many believed, was not just a battle between two armies. It was also a confrontation of two different worlds. The battle between the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons was not merely a war, but a clash of two different cultures. Harald Hardrada would fight in this battle not only for himself, but also for the future of Scandinavia. However, nothing would turn out to be as easy as he had imagined. On the day of the battle, Harold's army was positioned near Stamford Bridge, at a major crossing. The English army, led by Harald Godwinson, stood firm against Harold's forces. However, Harald Godwinson, the leader of the English army, was determined and well prepared. Godwinson had accumulated much experience in fighting against the Vikings and had built a large army. In this battle, he wasn't just trying to protect the English throne, but also to defend his people. However, things did not unfold as expected at Stamford Bridge. As Harold's army marched toward what seemed like a great victory, the English forces suddenly launched a counterattack. This surprise attack caught Harold off guard. The Vikings found themselves facing unexpected pressure during the Battle of Stamford Bridge. The chaos on the battlefield tested Harold's experience as a leader. Harald Hardrada took his first major blow during the battle. The English army fought courageously against some of the strongest warriors from Scandinavia. Although Vikings were known as tough and powerful fighters, they were now being tested in a way they had not been before. This battle would determine not just the fate of Scandinavia and England, but also the future of the Vikings. But what happened at the end of this battle? Harald Hardrada did not achieve an easy victory. The English army, with its clever battle tactics, successfully pushed the Viking forces back and claimed a significant victory. As in many battles before, Harald's leadership skills were once again tested. However, this time he faced an unexpected enemy and was unable to claim victory. How did Harald Hardrada react to this defeat? It wasn't just a loss on the battlefield. It also meant increasing political and economic pressure on him. But one thing was clear: Harald Hardrada would never retreat. Rather than turning this defeat into a downfall, it prepared him for a new struggle. Conquering England was still his greatest ambition, and this defeat would only inspire him more. What would happen next? Harald Hardrada, between victory and defeat, was preparing to find a new path. But to do so, he had to face another form of battle. In September 1066, a few weeks after the Battle of Stamford Bridge, Harald Hardrada planned one final assault on England. This would be both his and the Viking Age's final battle. Everything was so chaotic and tense that Harald, gathering his forces, decided to deliver one last blow to England. This battle would not only represent his final chance to prove his strength as a warrior, but also to create his own legend. How did Harald Hardrada see this battle? In his eyes, it wasn't just about victory, but also the future of Scandinavia. By attacking England one last time, he hoped to build a great empire. However, looking back at history, this battle was not just the final struggle of one leader, but also the final battle of the Vikings. In 1066, the Battle of Hastings took place, and it became a pivotal moment in the histories of both Harald Hardrada and England. After his defeat at Stamford Bridge, Hardrada had reached a point where retreat was no longer an option. He, along with his warriors, was preparing for England's final resistance. However, in every battle he faced, Harold Godwinson, fighting for the English throne, showed himself to be a far more strategic leader. This was not just a battle, it was also a contest of leadership. How did the final battle unfold? Harald Hardrada, leading his forces, advanced towards England with a large army. But this time, the situation was different. His army, after the experience at Stamford Bridge, was more seasoned and prepared. However, the army they faced was stronger and more experienced. Under the leadership of Harold Godwinson, the English army had become better organized, and it had the strength to counter Hardrada's assault. This battle would be Hardrada's final one. Despite his army's great efforts to conquer England, victory was no longer within reach. Despite all his military skill, Hardrada's forces could not withstand the might of the English army. This defeat was a great lesson that showcased not only his strength as a warrior, but also his leadership qualities. What happened after Harald Hardrada's defeat? The great leader who had aimed to conquer England and strengthen Scandinavia saw his last battle become a legendary story. Harald's name would be remembered among the greatest Viking leaders in history, but he never achieved his dream. His defeat would determine the future of Scandinavia and place the last of the great Viking warriors in the annals of European history. After this final battle, the world of Scandinavia would never be as strong as before. The great Viking warrior, who left his mark on history with the victories and successes he had throughout his life, would never fulfill his ultimate goal of controlling Scandinavia. But what does Harald Hardrada's legacy consist of? His legend stems not only from his victories in battle, but also from his leadership, his warrior spirit, and his legendary courage. Every battle, every victory brought more glory to his name. Yet his final battle marked the end of an era, placing the great warriors of Scandinavia in history. Harald Hardrada will remain a great leader, remembered for centuries after his death. This is not just the story of a warrior, but also the struggle for the salvation of an empire. Harald Hardrada's life is a legend of struggle, leadership, and the birth of a new legacy at the end of every battle.